Glenn Steckling has assumed the responsibilities of his family work in the field of UFO and ET research since his father, the late Mr. Fred Steckling, passed away 1991. This knowledge represents years of personal experiences and collective data. Now armed with first-hand sightings, Glenn continues to present the materials discovered and given his family spanning over 60 years. Mr. Steckling's latest revision to his father's book, fine book, Alien Bases on the Moon, now called Alien Bases on the Moon 2, contains a combination of more than 100 NASA photographs challenging the continued myth behind the dead moon and inhospitable planet theories, and exposes the increasing possibility of extraterrestrial activity there. On the Coast to Coast AM website, Glenn has sent to Lex some photos. Take a look at that while we conduct the interview with Glenn Steckling. Hi, Glenn. Welcome to Coast to Coast. How are you?
Good evening, George. Pleasure to be with you this evening.
Likewise. I'm so glad that you have picked up the work of your father, and you know what? I think you were destined to do that from the get-go, weren't you?
Well, I believe that's probably true since I've been exposed to it probably from the age of 4, so it's definitely part of my life's experiences.
Tell us a little about him, your father.
My father was very interested in aviation since my grandfather was a pilot in the Second War, and my father gravitated towards aviation as well. And during those years after the war, he collected a large map with a number of articles and reports of unidentified flying objects over Europe and pinned them into the global map. And then later, when he immigrated to this country, he continued to pursue those interests. And I believe that most of that culminated in 1963, in March of 1963, when the family was together in downtown Washington, D.C., coming out of the department store along with about 30 other people on the street side, along with a reporter from the Washington Daily News. We noticed a bell-shaped silvery object hanging over the city, low altitude, about 1,500 feet. And this was later reported in the Washington Daily News, which I still have the original article in our archives. And due to this sighting of this craft, which he had seen duplicated in many other reports throughout Europe through the 40s and 50s, he went to the Library of Congress and started his research and found books that had pictures, clear pictures, close-up pictures of this very same type of craft we noticed over Washington, D.C. in 1963. And that progressed from there. Was it a mission for him, an obsession for him, Glenn, to try to get to the bottom of all this? No, I wouldn't say it was an obsession. What he was is he was an intensely curious person. And once he was a type of pragmatic person that, you know, if he could see it, feel it, touch it, then it was real for him. And until that time, he had to satisfy his own curiosity. So I would say it was closer to a hobby, one that, of course, carried into further and further things as this whole program evolved for him.
From that 63 sighting, what led him up to the moment where he wrote the book Alien Bases on the Moon?
Well, in 63, going to the Library of Congress, he went to the alphabetical section and came across an author by the name of George Adamski.
Oh, yes.
Under the A section. And in the books, Flying Saucers Have Landed, which was co-authored by Desmond Leslie, the great-nephew to Winston Churchill, there were some of these pictures in there. So he found out that Mr. Adamski was on the West Coast, and he contacted him. And George Adamski was coming to the East Coast to lecture to the Air Force Reserves in 1963. So we made an agreement to meet the man when he came out to the East Coast, and a very close friendship endured after that point. And we actually spent the majority of our time either with him in our house or in the house of the Rotifers, which he stood out in Silver Springs with every time he came out to Washington, D.C. And along with Mrs. Rotifer, my father and mother helped arrange some of the international press conferences and other events that Mr. Adamski went to.
So they really got involved.
Very involved, absolutely. And we also had the opportunity to witness some of these crafts flying low level, which were later photographed in the Silver Springs February of 1965 film. When Mr. Adamski passed away in April of 1965, he was buried in Arlington Cemetery. And he gave my father possession of a lot of the material and told him to go on and continue the work. And in 1967, my father contacted NASA at Goddard Space Flight Center.
Mm-hmm.
Went there before 22 scientists, showed the films, the pictures, had a very intense discussion about this entire subject.
So they gave him an audience.
Oh, absolutely, gave him an invitation. And also, within a month from that time, Colonel Freeman out at the Pentagon issued the same thing. So they went right from NASA to the Pentagon, both within, 6 weeks' time. And to say the least, that this was not ridiculed information. In fact, they knew a great deal about it. They knew what the ships looked like. They were aware of the probability of their propulsion systems and what have you. So this was not a session where, they tried to debunk the entire situation. It was very much the opposite. Then, due to the contacts he developed over there at NASA, later on in the 70s, when he started to collect more information from the spaceflight program, Lunar Orbiter's Apollo program,
right,
they directed him to a particular division where he could order the microfiche they come in catalogs of 2x2 pictures, or you can get the microfiche itself.
So NASA was helpful to your father. As a matter of fact, I noticed that he was very thankful to NASA for helping provide him some material in his book.
Absolutely. I wouldn't say NASA as the organization, because these were individuals that were incorporated within NASA's program.
Okay.
But he was very thankful and very understanding of why some of this information is kept, so to speak, quiet, why some of it is released gradually, and so on and so forth. So he did not ridicule them. He was more interested in obtaining the information to make it available to the public.
Mm-hmm.
He figured since they were underfunded and understaffed, if he could help out, then everybody would be a winner.
So he continues to do his research.
Right.
And then, now, at this point, Glenn, had he decided to write a book, or was he just trying to collect data?
Well, it was he was working towards the publication of a manuscript. That's correct.
Okay.
And that culminated in the first book, Alien Bases on the Moon. And from there, after he passed away, then I added some revisions to it in order to, perhaps clarify some of the pictures, because you're looking at magnifications, and sometimes you have lunar orbiter shots. The film isn't quite as clear as a Hasselblad picture from Apollo and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So I was basically asked by a great deal of people around the world to see if I could not enhance it a little bit, and then I tried to put my 2 cents worth.
Now, the first printing of the book was 1981, right?
That's correct.
That's when it first came out. What was the response when it first came out, if you recall?
Great response. In 1984, he was invited to a select committee before the British House of Lords, where he presented the material as well. He was invited on national television in Japan. He went and lectured to universities in Australia. He did several European lecture tours, but he had already been involved from the film doing lecture tours since 1964. So in Europe, he was pretty well known at that point already. So the response to the book and the information was very positive and continues to be very positive.
You have updated the book, and of course we'll get into what it is and your thoughts and your dad's thoughts about the alien bases. You have updated the book. Why? What happened?
Well, I thought that it would be valuable to the reader to have a little bit of a background information on how my father got involved in this particular field, so to kind of round out the picture a little bit. And also, towards the end of it, to add a little bit of a generalized idea to give people about how science is progressing towards that the evolution of life and the composition of life continues to exist throughout the cosmos, and so it should not be a great surprise to find out that we're not alone in the universe. And I don't think, the last Gallup poll, more than 50% of the people definitely believe that we are not alone in the universe.
Was your father a believer prior to getting involved with Adamski, even beyond that sighting? Yes,
because they had sightings prior to that in different locations. And so that was one of the first sightings in '63 in Washington that led him to go to the Library of Congress. But he had tracked these things for probably 10 years beforehand. So he always felt that that, you know, looking up into the stars, that, you know, we're not the only